case for MENA as the next crypto hub. Please welcome on stage the moderator Mansoor Madhavji, partner at Blockchain Founders Fund, who will introduce his panel. Mansoor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We're excited to be here at IFX EXPO 2020 or 2022. So first off, we got an interesting panel talking about crypto and Web3 in the MENA region, and we have some excellent people to discuss this topic here today. So I'll give everyone a minute to go over their background and give you a sense of their expertise before we dive into the topic. So Melanie, do you want to start first, introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the line?
Yes, sure. So hello everyone, thanks for having me here. I'm a founder in the Web3 space. I'm coming out of 20 years of media marketing in the mobile tech industry and pivoted into technology after selling my media company in 2014. And really dived into the Web3 space in 2016 when I learned about Bitcoin, went down the rabbit hole, and then decided to also build in the industry. And I'm now a founder of WOM Protocol, which is a blockchain leveraging marketing solution, but I'm also an advisor and to various startups in the space and also investor in the space.
Thanks so much. Thanks Mansoor for having us, and thanks to all of you for being here. I'm Robbie Nakarmi. I'm Senior Counsel at Binance.com. I specialize in tech, VC, and M&A and investments in the Web3 space. I came from several years working in international law firms focused on tech VC. I'm based here in Dubai, and I'm very excited to be on this panel.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here in front of you guys. I see many familiar faces in the room, so great to have you all with us. You know, I'm sharing the stage with friends and advisors and collaborators. My name is Saqr Ereiqat. We are currently building the largest blockchain ecosystem in the world. A few years ago, we used to say it's the fastest growing in the world. By now, I'm quite proud to announce that, you know, with everyone's participation, we are now the largest blockchain ecosystem in the world. We operate the Crypto Oasis. The Crypto Oasis is geography, just like you would think of Silicon Valley or Crypto Valley. Crypto Oasis, the Middle East and Africa's blockchain ecosystem.
Hello, my name is Phillip Lord, British, which has been here about 2 years. We have a firm called Pinnacle Partners, which we help later stage companies come into the region for funding or setting up. Before that, I was investment banking in Asia for 20 years. Super excited about this region and the crypto.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Mansoor. I'm a partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. We invest early stage, pre-seed, seed into Web3 and crypto companies, and then we work very hands-on with them to help them grow. We recently just closed our second fund, a $75 million fund. So we're actively investing. We have over 100 portfolio companies. And of course, with the market where it is right now, we may have been a little bit more cautious, but we're still looking for interesting and exciting founders. Now, for this particular panel, I think it's really interesting to focus on MENA because there's a lot of different dynamics within the region from the UAE to the other countries. And I think this is a good area to kick it off. So Saqr, maybe you want to touch on some of the things that the UAE has done well so far, and then Robbie, you can jump in with what some of the other countries in the region have started doing comparisons.
Thanks for that, Mansoor. I think when we look at the UAE and when we thought about why we're setting up Crypto Oasis in the UAE, in the heart of this blockchain ecosystem, there's three elements that make the UAE special. And it's the amalgamation of these three elements that I believe will drive the growth of this industry. It's talent. We have some of the most talented people from all around the world moving here into the UAE. I look at this stage and I see people from all around the world, from all continents being represented, all moving into the UAE. Now, factually speaking, that means the DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Center, set up the most number of hedge funds in the world, registered more companies than they ever did in the world, and actually helped more than hundreds, if not thousands of companies set up here. A great example actually, and I'm glad that Robbie is sitting here next to me, is Binance. Binance has set up less than 18 months ago, and today has 650 employees. So this is a talent hotspot. all of this wouldn't be possible without this amazing infrastructure that we're all living in. Just by a show of hands, how many of you are based in the UAE? All right, perfect. Okay, so many of you are visitors here in the UAE, and you would see that this is a beautiful infrastructure, the roads, the amenities, everything around here. But it's not just about the physical infrastructure, it's about the digital infrastructure. Think about Oracle, IBM, Google, SAP, all of those, Microsoft, they're all setting up digital data centers over here, digital infrastructure for us to consume. But most importantly, there's a regulatory infrastructure that is shaping in the region. So we spoke about talent, we spoke about infrastructure, and we have Phillip on this side, we have Mansoor on the other side, we have capital. It is the capital of capital for all intents and purposes. This is what Abu Dhabi likes to call itself, the capital of capital. And when we look at the numbers, no other place was able to attract as many millionaires, as many hedge funds as the UAE in the past 12 months. With that, we have the perfect amalgamation of talent, capital, and infrastructure. We have amazing people moving from Italy, we have amazing people moving from France, we have amazing people moving from all around the world, right? And starting to build over here. Today, there is more than 1,600 companies here in the UAE that are active in the crypto space. Just to put that into context, Switzerland has been building this ecosystem for the past probably 7 or 8 years, and they're today counting 1,200 companies. Switzerland just came out with the latest number. They registered 7 companies in the last year. I think we did 7 companies in the last 10 days, right? So what we're seeing over here is that people are moving here because of these 3 elements: talent, capital, and infrastructure, and we're seeing the growth.
Thank you. Go ahead, Robbie.
Thanks so much, Saqr, and that's a very eloquent description of the value add that we see at Binance.com from the United Arab Emirates, and specifically also here in Dubai. A lot of you in the audience come from what we call TradFi, or the financial services industry, broker-dealers, FX, etc. For crypto, there's an intersection between finance and tech, and in the tech world we talk about the virtuous cycle, or the flywheel, and a lot of VC investors like Mansoor, Phillip, will also take a look at that when they evaluate investments. If we evaluate the UAE as an investment, you have the virtuous cycle here. You have the talent, you have the infrastructure, you have the global connectivity, and most importantly, you have the capital. And all of this contributes to a self-sustaining ecosystem, which is growing by the day. For that reason and for many others, Binance has made a large home for our Middle Eastern operations here in Dubai. But as Mansoor said, the topic is MENA, and the UAE is only one of the countries in the MENA region. Overall, Binance is extremely bullish on the MENA region as a hub for Web3 and for crypto. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of the important reasons is demographics. 70% of the population in this region is under the age of 35. Mobile and internet penetration is higher here than almost any other market in the world. Saudi Arabia, for example, has an average of 2.2 5G mobile phone data lines for each Saudi citizen, which is crazy. Which is absolutely crazy. So it's a very digitally native population. So that's one of the reasons we're very optimistic. But we think that if we look at the GCC and in MENA in general, every country has its role to play. There are some countries which will, for example, serve as a conduit of capital and influence, like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, as well as being big markets into themselves. Probably Saudi and UAE bigger than Qatar. But if you look further afield, you have absolute juggernauts like Egypt, like Turkey, countries with very large populations, maybe more than 200 million people combined, again, with young, growing populations that are tech-savvy and well-educated. You have other countries in the region that are small in terms of footprint, in population size, such as Israel, such as Bahrain, such as Lebanon, but are contributing an absolutely outsized influence into the development of Web3 through advanced regulation, through a high level educated populations that are well trained in science and technology. And most importantly, as a source of talent that can be drawn in to the highly competitive, high-wage economies in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and elsewhere in the region. So not only in the UAE with the virtuous cycle, but in MENA, we see the development of this flywheel as well.
Thank you, Robbie. I think you touched on some very interesting things with respect to the region as a whole, which I think we should dive deeper into. I think first, I think what would be really interesting is to talk a little bit about the investment trends within the UAE first, and then we can go into comparing across the region. But Philip, if you could start with that and talk about the investment trends in the UAE, that'd be great.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think if you go back 5-6 years, there's a lot of investments by the sovereign wealth funds into funds, and then they've started deploying into public capital markets, into investments there. But like more and more, they're doing a lot more like VC investing and then also direct investments. So we see a lot of American companies, a lot of European companies that are in growth stage, wanting to come out here for funding. Obviously, the energy prices, giving everybody a lot of cash in the region. There's also a lot of new family offices. The accord between Israel and UAE brought a different dimension of people to the region, and people that you wouldn't expect to have family offices here have quietly set them up. I think you'll continue to see that with China opening up as well. So it's not just the MENA region. This is turning into like a British Virgin Islands sort of structure to open up your family office as well. But yeah, the capital is good, but it's maturing, and they want, I would say, more and more private deals. Later stage, but there are a lot of new funds opening up in the earlier stage as well here.
Yes, and what I have seen also, being a senior advisor to Roland Berger, which is one of the global consultancy companies, they have a crypto economy expertise, and the interest from corporates here in the region in the metaverse and in infrastructure technology, solving the issues for building in the metaverse, building in the game segment, building in the digital twin segment is enormous, and we have just created a metaverse strategy also for one of the biggest real estate companies here in the region. And just seeing more and more of these companies are moving into the space, so this is where I see also, this is a big trend now here in the region, being on the forefront of the metaverse strategies.
Yeah, no, so I think this is one thing actually, we can talk about this first, a little bit about some of the use cases. So you touched on the metaverse strategy, and I'm sure there's a number of other use cases that each of you have seen in your roles that you think should be highlighted. And so maybe Saqr, you want to start with that. It'd be interesting if you could touch on any specifically that are region specific and unique to MENA.
I think the region has a history by now, or the UAE has a history by now, of accepting early stage technologies into government. Why do I say government? Because government is the driving force behind many things that we see over here. They kick it off and then the private sector follows. Many think that what we're seeing here in the UAE with the crypto space is something that started in 2019, maybe 2020 even. So what I can tell you is that in 2015, I've had the honor and the pleasure to advise the government on their blockchain strategy. 2015, right? We're here in 2022, and we're still building that space. In 2015, we already said there should be 1,000 companies in the ecosystem. So it's somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy that at the time that in 2021, we announced that there's 1,000 companies in the ecosystem. So that's blockchain. Blockchain as such is something that by now is somewhat adopted in the wider government. There's government use cases, for example, to authenticate your certificates. The KHDA today uses blockchain to authenticate school certificates moving from one emirate to the other. Dubai Ports is using blockchain to facilitate trade. Etisalat has set up UAE Trade Connect, which essentially allows to do trade finance using blockchain. Right. Now, the next version of all of that was what we are calling Web3, NFT, Metaverse. And again, they followed a similar structure. The first thing that they did is the royals came out and they said, we are supporting this technology. So His Highness the Crown Prince of Dubai came out and said, hey, we have something called the Dubai Metaverse Strategy, when no one else in the world, even or on a government level particularly, was thinking about what is the metaverse. Dubai had a Dubai Metaverse Strategy. And then went the next step and they said, you know what, welcome to everyone from around the world, welcome Sandbox and Decentraland and all of the metaverses from all around the world, come join us here in Dubai and start developing this space with us together, right? So first they put out the strategy. Second, they made it a talent hotspot or a hotspot for companies to arrive here. And third, they actually put the investment into this space, right? So when we look at the metaverse, I can't refer to many because not many are announced, but actually the majority of all government entities on UAE level and on Dubai level, and Abu Dhabi and Fujairah and others, are actually developing their metaverse right now. A great example, the first government entity in the metaverse, actually that goes to Gabriel and his embassy of Barbados, but you know, one of the first bigger government entities in the metaverse was at the time the Ministry of Economy. The Minister of Economy, his gremium of 10 leaders from the industry, from government, actually meet in the metaverse to define the digital roadmap of the UAE. And that has led to the UAE announcing a digital economy strategy, right? The UAE today has set up, so this is beyond metaverse, beyond blockchain, they want to develop themselves as a tech hub for the world. And again, it's natural to think about why they would. You're sitting at the center of the world geographically, right? You're able to allow people to enter into this space easily, right? And case in point with Binance having 650 people within 12 months. Just for a point of reference, we have offices in Switzerland. Over there we tried to hire someone from Canada, which is, you know, a first world nation for all intents and purposes. It took us 6 months. 6 months. Today Binance can talk about 650 people within 1 year, right? So in summary, first of all, they put out strategies. Second, they put the leadership behind it, right? The leadership actually supports these strategies and sets them as high agenda. And then the government entities follow with use cases. And I'm very positive on this entire space here in the UAE.
Thank you, Saqr. I think one thing that's really interesting is like, if you look at the crypto space as a whole, I don't think we're at a point where we say the UAE is a global leader yet. But I think they're making strides toward getting there. So maybe Phillip, you want to jump in and talk about what you think that the UAE needs to add or do to start making their market be considered the global leader in this.
Actually, I think it's doing pretty well with Binance, Polygon. You know, you saw that new foundation of the weekend that announced $1 billion out of Abu Dhabi. I mean, they're making pretty aggressive, ways forward. But I think obviously one way is funding. You know, so the more VCs that they bring to the community here, they've got plenty of cash in Abu Dhabi and Saudi and Qatar. You know, that will help encourage new founders. Actually, I don't have too much to add on that, because I think they're doing a pretty good job so far.
Fair enough. I guess, Melanie, you want to talk, I think one of the big things with success in a strategy like that, and a big indicator, is foreign investment. And so I know, Saqr, you touched on briefly about family offices setups, and maybe you'll have some stuff to add on it, but maybe Melanie, because of your prior experience, I think this would be something interesting for the audience for you to touch on in terms of foreign investment coming in to the UAE.
Well, I mean, I think on the one hand, foreign investment is coming here. On the other hand, also LPs are here that are feeding some of the amazing funds that are out there. But it's also good to see, I think for me, especially also wearing the hat of a founder, it's great to see that really the founders are coming here. Because at the end, what Saqr mentioned is, you need really the talent settling here. And this is, the environment here in the region is getting more creative, it's more welcoming, opening up, it's an easy lifestyle. Also me, I'm a founder, I'm also a mom of 3, I have kids that need to go to school, they need to, create their ecosystem here too. Everything is so easy here in the region. And on top of that, traveling is super easy. You have so many beautiful locations close by. So it's always, as a founder, you have, on the one hand, you need the investment, you need the infrastructure, but there's still, you have a life to live, and the ecosystem here is just perfect for this. So I think it's, besides the investment part, that's a natural. Here in the region, there is a lot of money, there's a lot of support, and a lot of funds are just coming here to get the backing also by, LPs and have a good setup here.
Absolutely, thank you. I think now would be a nice time to switch gears and start talking about some of the other countries in the region. And this region is very unique compared to many, just because there's so many different dynamics, from Turkey to Israel, Lebanon, you got Iraq and Syria, so many other things with Egypt going on. And I know, Robbie, you're very knowledgeable in this area. So I think it'd be exciting for the audience to hear your perspectives and some comparison on some of the countries and what you see in terms of like the engagement from the public in the crypto space, but even on the side of like company formations and activity from a government and regulatory perspective in the space.
Absolutely, those are some great and important topics. So for us, for me personally, I've lived in the UAE for 8 years now, and I've done a lot of travel and work in the region, worked a lot with governments as well as with the private sector. I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of different dynamics at play. One of the things that actually makes the region pretty easy to understand is that I would say generally, especially here in the GCC, the governments are hyper-focused on increasing FDI, increasing participation in the workforce, creating competitive economies, high talent, high paying jobs, and creating the ecosystem that goes with that, which is great. And as an investor, as a foreign investor coming into the region, there are a lot of incentives for you to deploy capital here and to invest in people here and projects here, low taxes, frictionless regulation in setting up companies like company formation, as you mentioned, etc. So if we look at the reception of crypto in the region, I think different countries have taken different approaches to it, and that's for various both domestic and political reasons. The UAE, for example, has been one of the most forward-thinking, let's say, and that's actually on brand for the UAE. The UAE knows that in the grand scheme of things in the world, it's a relatively small player. There's only 10 million people. The economy is relatively small compared to established Western countries, for example, UK, US, Canada, and the European Union, of course, acting as a bloc. But what we've seen, and I'm sure all of you in the audience have seen in the last few years, especially with the pandemic, is growing concern in Western countries about high inflation, increasingly unsustainable national debt, money printing, etc., etc. The UAE sees an asymmetric opportunity to become a leader in a space where maybe the Western countries are not focused on or falling behind. I think that if we look broader than the UAE, Saudi Arabia in the GCC is a sleeping giant, of course. It's an enormous market. There's a lot of capital. It has a leadership that's committed to changing the view of what Saudi Arabia is in the world. You look at Bahrain, for example. Bahrain is a small country. Its population is less than 2 million. However, Binance has found that some of Bahrain's regulations for crypto exchanges in particular, as well as other crypto participants like broker-dealers, venture capital funds, the rules are extremely progressive. The Central Bank of Bahrain, the government of Bahrain, the Economic Development Board of Bahrain have really worked very, very hard to foster a crypto ecosystem. the first crypto exchanges in the region were based out of there. Some of our local competitors, who started in the region before us, were able to do so because of the very receptive environment in Bahrain. And while other countries, for example, like Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman in the GCC are a little bit further behind, but even Qatar last October issued a national consultation on blockchain and its role in the Qatari economy. Obviously, they were pretty focused on hosting the World Cup, and so I think that they'll turn their attention to that more this year. Broader, looking further afield, when we look at MENA, Morocco, for example, which is part of the MENA region, even though it's several time zones away, Morocco has been extremely interested in seeing what crypto and Web3 can do to modernize its own economy. We've seen a lot of talented founders and employees even come to us from Morocco. So for Binance, looking across the whole region, we're very, very positive. I'll give you like one anecdote. We went to Bahrain in March during the last Formula One that was held in Bahrain last season. Myself and some Binance colleagues of ours were waiting in a car park to take a shuttle bus to the race. And there was a young Bahraini guy who was marshalling traffic. And one of our colleagues had a Binance t-shirt on. And we had just announced that we were going to set up in Bahrain. He came over to us and he's like, "Are you guys from Binance?" And we're like, "Yeah." He's like, "Wow, I want to show you my gaming project that I've set up on Polygon." And then right there, while we were waiting for the bus, he went through his pitch deck, he gave us the 30-second elevator pitch, and our chief investment officer was like, "This is actually a great project." Gave him his business card, There's very few industries where that can happen, except for crypto. And there's also very few places in the world where that can happen, except for here in the Middle East.
To add to what Robbie was saying, what's interesting, so the Arab Youth Hub did a questionnaire for all of the young people in the region. What's interesting about the region, what many people don't look at, what is very important for this future war on talent, is that we have some of the youngest population in the world across the region, right? If you look at the Middle East and North Africa region, by average, we are the youngest people in the world. With all the new technology that's coming up today, people are meeting in Davos. The World Economic Forum has come up and said more than 50% of the workforce will have to be retrained. Obviously, having a younger population will allow you to train these people very early on. The Arab Youth Hub has asked Arab youth, where would you want to live? And the majority of people actually came back and said, we want to live in the UAE. So while the UAE is super small in the grand scheme of things, it is a gateway to the entire Arab world, right? All of the young Arabs want to move to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or the UAE. And with that, there is a massive influx of talented individuals that move over here, which provide the base for everything that we are seeing. A couple of years back, because I like to say I've been in this space before it was cool to be in this space, right? You couldn't find developers or talented technical individuals in the region, or they were very scarce. Today, more and more talented individuals are moving here, more and more talented individuals are graduating from here, providing this hub that is able to develop for the future.
But I think now, as of the news of the last days, is with regulation coming in place and also catching up here in the region, I think it's now interesting to see how it's going to work out here for the region. It's a very competitive space because there are so many countries here in the region. I think looking back, also I think Binance was once in Malta, and also we had once a setup in Malta, and remembering the times when Malta and Gibraltar were on the forefront of this move into the crypto space and were kind of called the crypto hubs in the world, these tiny little island countries, and they kind of lost it. And I think this is now very important for the regulators in the MENA region to look a little bit back to see what went wrong when they were early on in the space, the kind of the trailblazers, known as the trailblazers, and they aren't anymore. And here, I think we are now seeing also faster moves in this space, but I still think also regulators should be a little bit cautious and take it slow, but get it right. And so keen to hear also your point of view of what impact it's going to have now here in the MENA region.
So overall, I think regulators here are more strict than many other places in the world, right? If you want to go to an ADGM or a DIFC, a fully regulated setup, you could easily be a year and a half in that space. Another interesting thing to note is although UAE is so tiny, if you look at it globally, it's being lauded as one of the leaders in the regulatory space, right? So if we look at ADGM, for example, ADGM was as early as 2018 would give an in-principle license to exchanges. And you know what? Some of these exchanges are still in that state, right? That means that the regulator is actually taking its time. The IFC, for example, while they have been active in this space, are very cautious in publishing regulation in that space, right? Having said that, what we're seeing over here, and what I think we have as a plus point to us, and I really don't say that because I'm here on stage and I'm in the UAE, is the leadership of the UAE. Malta, Estonia, Gibraltar, all of them had to succumb to the EU in the end, right? The EU was there and said, hey, you know what, hold on, you can't do this. Yeah, you built an ecosystem, there's hundreds of companies there right now, but you've got to stop. Here, the entire leadership, from the Dubai leadership to the UAE leadership, is standing behind this. They're using this in government. The Minister of Economy meets in the metaverse. Who's going to say, hey, you're not allowed to go to the metaverse now? The UAE, and many people don't know that, has actually had their CBDC active since 2019, 2020. You can go online, Google Project Aber, A-B-E-R, right? So they went out and they actively started using this. What I'll let you in on a bit of a secret that I found out, and Robbie can back me up here. If you look at the legal text of the UAE, stablecoins are already legal tender. So the regulatory environment is already there. Because at the time when they had to use Aber, they had to actively start using it. Now, do I agree with you on the fact that they have to take it slow? 100%. But I think we have an X factor over here, which is this progressive leadership that is willing to say, hey, you know what, we're going to figure this out with the private sector. And today, I can say that we are in active talks with the regulators. I've worked in 23 countries all around the world, most of the time on government level. I've never been sitting on a table with a regulator. Here now it's business as usual. The regulator invites you and says, hey, what do you think? You're in the business, you are figuring this out, and I can see Hex Trust here, right there, part of these circles as well. And looking in the room, I can see many of the organizations that are actively part of this discussion. So, am I a bit worried that it could go wrong? Yes, 100%. But do we actually have all of the ingredients to make this successful? Also yes.
Great. Thank you, Saqr. So there's one more thing I want to touch on before we start to wrap up. But meanwhile, if there's anyone in the audience that has questions, think about them and then raise your hand and we'll get to answering those questions. So before we got on stage, we were talking in one of the meeting rooms, and Robbie, you mentioned something that I thought really was eye-opening. And it was on the subject of Egypt, where he mentioned that this is maybe the country to keep an eye on in the region because of 100 million people. And so I'd love for you to...
I said that.
Oh, my bad.
Saqr said that, I agree.
That's my tagline.
Sorry, okay. Robbie got the credit for that. Okay, Saqr, maybe you want to touch on what the opportunity for Egypt is, because a lot of the focus of the conversation has been on the UAE. And I think it'd be interesting, what you think that Egypt can take advantage of here.
Yeah, so it's no secret, I say it on stage. Everyone's talking about Saudi Arabia. I'm intimate in Saudi Arabia, so much so I got married in Saudi Arabia, right? My client was the Saudi Arabian government, where we set up innovation ecosystems for them in the healthcare space. I think Saudi Arabia is a serious opportunity, don't misunderstand me, but there is a more serious opportunity that people forget about in the region, Because what is the topic? It's Middle East and North Africa. Egypt today is 100 million people, and that's the official number. And if you ask any Egyptian, they'll tell you it's probably 200 million people, but no one knows yet, right? With that, they again, talking about young population, they have some of the youngest population in the world. They have some of the highest crypto adoption in the region. They have some of the best universities when it comes to technology in the region. It's not Saqr's point of view, but if you look at the statistics, within 10 years, Egypt is projected to be the largest economy in the Middle East. But what's different in Egypt than in Saudi or in the UAE, that it's mostly an Egyptian population that you're speaking to. You sit in the cafe, the owner will be Egyptian, and the waiter will be Egyptian, and the guy that cleans up is Egyptian, and the guy sitting there is an Egyptian, right? Looking around this room, I see maybe 60 nationalities. Just here, I see 5 different nationalities on stage, right? So with that, Egypt, I think, is probably the sleeping giant that no one talks about, right? And if you go to Egypt and you set up $1 billion business, then remember your friend Saqr.
Robbie, Melanie, Phillip, anyone want to add anything?
Definitely, I agree. I agree with Saqr. You know, before I worked in crypto, I worked a lot with fintechs and tech companies in the region. The Egyptian venture capital and tech scene is very impressive. You have great, highly reputed accelerators there, like Flat 6 Labs, for example. You have a lot of Egyptian founders that are graduates of Silicon Valley accelerators like Y Combinator, and a lot of engineering and software development talent that go on to work in Silicon Valley, in Singapore, and London, and other top hotspots around the world. Absolutely agree that from a demographic angle, it's an absolute bomb of an opportunity. And I think it's not only for crypto, but for tech, for fintech, for traditional financial services, for brokerages. I think the only thing that will hold Egypt back is whether the Egyptian government, whether institutions in Egypt will be able to adopt the latest trends in technology, will be able to get themselves in the mindset that, hey, you know, we could be like a center for tech, and let go of, let's say, old-fashioned ways of thinking or old-fashioned ways of doing banking, etc. We already see green shoots in that. You know, the young Egyptian population that are involved in the tech space, that have been educated and gone to work around the world, are bringing that expertise back to Egypt. We're already seeing the Egyptian government issue consultation papers, issue requests for proposal from top law firms, investment banks, and consulting firms around the world to reform parts of their economy. They're already talking with the World Bank, with the IMF, about making structural changes to their economy to ensure that it's competitive. So we're definitely sure that we're going to see a lot from Egypt. And I think that for other countries in the region as well, for Turkey, for Saudi Arabia, there'll be lots to learn from Egypt.
Thank you, Robbie. Do we have any questions from the audience? All right, then we'll jump into closing remarks. Phillip, we'll start with you, and then we'll come down this way. If there's one thing that you could have the audience take away from this presentation, what would you want them to remember?
I think start a business here. I think it's like a unique opportunity in the world right now. Zero tax, sunshine, great access to good quality staff and funding. What more can you want?
I second that. Having said that, it's one thing that we haven't actually spoken about. Just by show of hands, how many people own crypto or have interacted with crypto here? All right, okay. And from the crowd that hasn't touched it yet, do you have somewhat of a FOMO or fear? Do you feel like you're late to the game just from the crowd that hasn't? You feel you're early? All right, okay. We are as early with this. If I would compare what we're doing today with developments of mobile phones, then we are in the era of suitcases and mobile phones, right? A mobile phone is what you carry in a suitcase around with you, and it probably has 10 minutes of talk time. If you haven't interacted with this, please educate yourself. Don't listen to anyone here on stage. Go online, do your own research. The World Economic Forum has stuff out there. Princeton University, you can do the courses for free. On edX, you'll find 1 million courses that are for free to educate yourself. If there's one message that I want people to take away that we haven't actually touched upon, is we're so early in this space, and everything that we are doing right now is subject to change. You haven't missed the train, but you should start thinking about it.
That's a great message from Saqr. I'm sure it's reflected in all the panelists. I would say, you know, in 1995, Bill Gates went on the David Letterman show, and David Letterman said to him, "Hey Bill, are you on this new internet thing?" And Bill Gates was like, "Yeah, I use the internet." And he was like, "You know, do we really need it? You know, what's it all about?" It's actually a very interesting clip if you go and check it out on YouTube. I think that we're probably around there still. You know, it's funny that Saqr said, you know, don't listen to what other people are going to say. You know, earlier today, even in this conference, there was some discussion by a number of gentlemen about crypto. You know, some were fans, some weren't. But it's interesting that on a topic or a panel that wasn't about crypto, they probably spent like more than half the time talking about it, right? So whether you're a true believer that's going to the moon with Satoshi or whether you're a skeptic, it's definitely here to stay. I highly encourage you to have a look around, get involved in the space, and decide for yourself.
Not much to add here, but definitely I think the biggest move in the crypto space is going to come from a very playful perspective, especially looking at Gen Z, and that's why, you know, getting into it even with something like Doge or meme coins or whatever, some games, play around a little bit with it. It doesn't have to be always, you know, the move through Bitcoin or anything else, but touch it, get involved into it and play around with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, use small balances, test it out, get familiar with it, and there's a reason that, you know, the UAE and other countries in the region are putting so much effort and resources behind the technology, right? And obviously a part of that's going to be, you know, attracting talent, creating jobs, and with that comes like the education, right? So you have to learn about it, and the only way to learn is by testing out, play around with it, get familiar with it, and that creates opportunity. That's it for our panel today. Thank you everyone for joining us on stage and sharing your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.